Topping today's news, Prime Minister Philip Davis gives the go-ahead for troops to Haiti. The Royal Bahamas Defense Force shares data and trends on illegal migration, poaching, and smuggling. And we get the latest on the government's efforts to remain off the EU financial blacklist. Good evening, Bahamas. I'm Jarino Saunders. This is your JCN Evening News. It is a pleasure to have you join us. As said by Royal Bahamas Defense Force Commander Dr. Raymond King, who at the Office of the Prime Minister's weekly press briefing gave details into training and preparedness of the country's national force ahead of a peacekeeping mission to Haiti. In August, the Bahamas pledged 150 troops towards the multinational force to help restore law and order in Haiti, organized by the United Nations and led by Kenya.
We have received our warning order from the Prime Minister that we will deploy, but we have yet to receive instructions explicitly in terms of the role or functions. But I'm providing that expert advice to the Honorable Minister of National Security as well as the Prime Minister in terms of the risk, the vulnerabilities, and my expert opinion.
The commander further informed that the Bahamas has received the benefit of several training exercises.
We're going with 3 platoons, a minimum of 50 persons per platoon. It is expected for those persons to spend 4 months duration in Haiti. Those persons are being selected from all of the main branches within the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Intelligence, administrations, operations, planning, communications. You need persons from all of those disciplines, including interpreters, persons from our welfare unit, our chaplaincy office. And so those persons would have been deliberately selected. The persons who would comprise the security operations or the infantry operations, they would have been persons who would have been trained, not only just this national training that we're going through now.
U.S. Special Operation observers will oversee training evaluations, which will be fortified with another level of training. According to Dr. King, they have collaborated with South American counterparts, Chile and Argentina, with officers to be sent to their peacekeeping centers of excellence. There will be yet another training session when all of the Caribbean countries involved in the multinational force gather in Jamaica later this year.
There's a criteria that must be met according to the UN in terms of the person's age, service years, medical, physical conditions. There are some criteria that we have to meet in terms of our selections. But we have selected the persons who would have been extensively trained.
Commodore Dr. Raymond King, the commander of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, has released new information and statistics on the migration trends and transnational threats to the Bahamas as well. At the Office of the Prime Minister's weekly press briefing, the commander first described the migrant trends and how those trends are affecting different parts of the country.
Statistics to date indicates that year over, for the fiscal year 23 versus the fiscal year 22, the migration rate has increased by 90%. 28 nationalities have been encountered, and half of that population were Haitian nationals. So we're looking at absolute figures of 1,500 migrants detained versus 800 for fiscal year 22. In the southern Bahamas, Haitian nationals, we have seen a very significant decrease in irregular migration from Haiti to the Bahamas compared to previous years.
The Royal Bahamas Defense Force is also currently looking at targeting poachers, with Commander King noting the fishery ecosystem and food security threat within the current proliferation of illegal, unprotected, and unregulated fishing is unsustainable.
But now we're now faced with a shift in their strategy as we speak right now, what we are countering. Those Dominican fishing vessels are now using the territorial seas of the Republic of Cuba. And they're now sending those smaller vessels, those skiffs, across the Bahama Channel on the verge of the Great Bahama Bank, which makes it extremely difficult to detect those small skiffs with 2 persons on board. and they would move in a clandestine way at night back to the middle of the channel. A much larger vessel, still small, would secure the fishery products and then move to the mothership in the Cuban territorial seas. We have moved resources. We intend to flood the banks. We intend to dominate that area.
Commander King said there is going to be diplomatic efforts with Cuba with the hopes of culminating a comprehensive maritime agreement which would help to decrease poaching in Bahamian waters. He says the Royal Bahamas Defense Force is making strides in its crackdown on the smuggling of arms and ammunition as well, seizing some 350 illegal weapons this year with the help of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Commander King also revealed statistics on drug smuggling in the country.
Our statistics for illicit drug arrests, we would have experienced a decrease of some 11%. However, in terms of poundage, we would have experienced a percentage increase of 217%.
Commander King also announcing the acquisition of an additional flag vessel soon to be commissioned named HMBS A.D. Hannah. Public Works Minister Clay Sweeting has announced that a task force will assess unregulated shanty towns on Abaco next year. This is a step in the right direction to address the growing concern of shanty town expansion, he says.
We initiated shanty town demolitions a few months ago, Cool Acres and then All Saints a few weeks ago, and we'll continue to meet in January. We anticipate to discuss family islands. I anticipate that Abaco will be the first family island that we assess within the task force. We understand the concerns not just in Abaco, but in Eleuthera, islands such as Harbor Island. There's a discussion on immigration and illegals and persons that do not have proper documentation. So we're working very hard to ensure that we do this as swiftly as possible. But I can guarantee you that the government remains committed, the task force remains committed to doing our job and to ensure that we, all these shanty towns, that we do it in a way and as quick as possible.
Minister Sweeting asserts that Abaco will be top of the task force list to be assessed. However, he gave no timeline as to how long these assessments may take, as due diligence must be carried out, he says.
As you understand that we have Bahamians living in these unregulated communities, so we do assess them. We get proper data. We collect who's there, who's illegal, who isn't, and then in some instances, some persons may have deeds on certain properties. So we have to assess all of this, whether they got building control approvals, whether or not it was done the right manner. So all of these are a combination of issues that task force assesses. We have social services, Ministry of Health and Environment. So all of these ministries have worked together so to ensure that everything is done in the right manner and safe and in regards to all of that.
Amid criticism from the public who suggest the government may be dragging their feet when it comes to the eradication of shanty towns in the country, the newly appointed Minister of Works defends the efforts made so far by the Davis administration.
Well, I mean, the thing is that person said that there wasn't going to be any headway in regards to unregulated communities, period. I think we dispelled that pretty quickly. So, you know, things take time. We've been very aggressive. We did our job in the past month in that regard. So, you know, I mean, if I say it's going to happen, it'll happen.
The Davis administration budgeted $600,000 for the Shantytown Task Force. And finally, in this segment, Prime Minister Philip Davis, during his contribution to the budget debate on the Financial Services Compendium of Bills, provided reassurance that the Bahamas will be removed from the financial blacklisting. However, he lamented the fact that the European Union kept the Bahamas on the blacklist in October based on old information, despite the OECD in November agreeing to remove the Bahamas from their blacklist based on the Bahamas' efforts to be compliant.
There may be those confused by our optimism, given the fact that the Bahamas was still listed on the EU non-cooperative list just over a month ago in October. However, it should be noted that this assessment was based on the OECD's report that was completed in April. So at the time the EU made its decision, the information was already over 6 months old. In fact, the EU had their Council of Ministers meeting in October and made a decision not to remove us from the blacklist. And the very next month, in November, the OECD agreed that based on our approach to compliance, we would be removed. Surely, you would think that these two European institutions would talk to each other in the interest of ensuring that the decision regarding our continued presence on a non-cooperative list was made fairly and was based on the most current and accurate information. Instead, the decision was made using outdated information with disregard for the impact that this inaccurate decision could have on us.
The Prime Minister provided Parliament an update with regards to the United Nations having more of an input and oversight on global financial services.
From day one, Madam Speaker, I'm advocating on the world stage for a change to the existing financial services regime. Because at the end of the day, it is small island developing states like ours that have been former colonies, that are black governed, they are the ones that are targeted. That's right. And I'm not just saying this here. I say to them in their face when I meet them. Right? And like I said, it's taking root. Because at the very first meeting at the UN, I think it was like 5 days after I was sworn in, I met with the Secretary General of the United Nations. I was during my discussion with him, raising the same issue, that he wants to set up a task force to address this issue. That task force was in fact set up. And we have now seen progress on this front. They reported in September.
Prime Minister Davis acknowledged that some business entities may have a difficulty complying with the new standards. He noted the purpose of the changes is not to discourage business in the Bahamas, but to attract bona fide business people who will conduct and engage in legitimate business activities while demonstrating that the Bahamas can adhere to the highest and most stringent global financial standards. We'll take a break here. We'll be right back after these commercials.